Okay, I intended to get this out as an outdoorsy video, and I intended to get this out a lot sooner because we're like several Oz books behind, but I can't hold cue cards and play with the tentacle mount, and we've discovered that because between breaking two we now have one left. Yay for cobbling together both parts. Anyway, seeing as neither of us are particularly camera nice, we're pointing this at the dog while we tell the story, unless Dan has something to chime in with, in which case we'll point it up at him. Yeah, he's like, I will look off in the distance. And hopes you don't. Anyway. I don't want to be involved. Yes you do. You want to be involved, if nothing else. At least hear my story for half an hour, gosh darn it, because then you won't have to watch it again. Look at the bright side. Okay, so Ozma of Oz is the best of the first four books, and it's the one I always tell people to go read if you don't want to go read any of the other ones, and I didn't realize how much my TV color is flipping out, but that's okay. It's interesting to look at Quinn while she sleeps. So anyway, the book itself is The Return of Dorothy, so you're not as lost like you are in the second book. And it actually opens with Dorothy and Uncle Henry riding a ship going down to Australia. I forget what the premise of going to Australia is about. I assume they're starting a new life or something. But A&M's still at home in Kansas, so who knows? Anyway, they end up in a shipwreck, and when Dorothy starts getting in the shipwreck, she's like, oh, this ain't a bad happening. I've already been through a tornado. So she ends up climbing in this chicken coop, and when they come ashore, this chicken comes out with her, and on the first day, she actually wakes up to the chicken, like, squawking about her egg and everything, and the chicken tells her name is Bill, because, you know, that's what the kid wanted to name her, and, you know, Dorothy being a femme is like, that ain't gonna work, we're gonna call you Billina, B-I-L-L-I-N-A. And so she's like, yeah, that works. Anyway, they head off, and the first thing they encounter is this warning scratched in the stand, beware the wheelers. And they have no idea what the wheelers are. Nobody does. So they keep on walking, and they encounter these lunch and dinner pail trees, which are totally awesome. And I think are still like one of my favorite things from the Oz universe, even though we're not in Oz. You'll discover that in a minute. But they're just like really cool idea. They're like full lunches, full dinners, growing in full pails or lunch boxes, just hanging off of these trees. And Dorothy picks one of each because she's like freaking hungry. And then the wheelers come out of nowhere and start wheeling around, and they're these crazy fantastical beings that are in like one-piece jumpsuits, and their fingernails have grown out to become hard, like wheels, basically. Wheels that come off like horse hooves, sort of, off the ends of their hands and feet, and they roll around on all four wheels, and that's why they call themselves the wheelers. Anyway, the wheelers, like, attack them and chase them around and laugh at them and throw stuff at them, and they escape them by basically going up in this rocky area where the wheelers can't go, because the wheelers are on wheels. And while she's up there, Dorothy's poking around, and she finds this nice locked little cavern and figures out how to unlock it, and in there, she finds TikTok, this mechanical guy, and she figures out how to wind him up because he's got instructions on him. That's the great thing about, like, anyone who designs anything in the fairy worlds of Baum, they leave instructions. You know, there's no fiddling about with that. So she gets him awake, and they go off, and she's eating the dinner pail, and TikTok actually tells her, like, look at the bottom of the dinner pail, because she's like, the wheelers claim these were their trees. And he's like, look at the bottom, and she's like, there's a big old, you know, E, and it's in purple. And he's like, yeah, these trees are planted by the king of the land of Ev, and he gives her like a brief history of what happened to the land of Ev, including King Edvardo's trading his family for a long life, which we'll come back to later because that's pretty much the crux of the plot. Alright. So in the meantime, they start heading back. Oh, look at you, Quinn, you're so cute. Oh, the baby. Alright. And TikTok knocks out the wheelers. He takes like one of the lunch pails, or dinner pails essentially, and just like beats the hell out of them. And he managed to interrogate one of them about what's going on in the land of Ev right now, because TikTok has been deactivated for a long time in that cave. And the wheeler tells him, like, look, there's a new ruler, this Princess Languidere, who, yeah, she's real fun. And she's the only one left of the royal family. You have to, you know, go over and talk to her. And the funny thing, when they get over to her house, she, like, really doesn't like dealing with people. And in fact, she says on, like, her palace front door, like, go to, like, the third wing on the left. And there's, like, no third wing on the left. They eventually end up, like, interrupting this maid who's, like, not real pleased to see them either. And at one point, when she ends up talking to the princess, she's like, I have to spend 15 minutes a week doing bureaucratic stuff for the kingdom, and I am so sick of it. So please, go, feel free to find and rescue my people. But that's a little bit later. First, though, she meets Dorothy, and she decides she likes her head. So the Princess Langdoweir's, like, weird fetish is collecting heads from people she thinks are pretty and keeping them all in these cabinets. And if you've seen Return to Oz, this is Princess Langdoweir. I forget, we haven't seen Return to Oz yet. I forget what they actually do with her character in that movie, but in the book, yeah, she's got a bunch of heads, and her temperament changes depending on which head she's wearing. And so, of course, when she's meeting Dorothy, she's got one of the pretty ones on that happens to be, like, a little bit of a biatch. And she decides she wants Dorothy's head, because Dorothy's going to be real pretty when she grows up, right? And so she grabs Dorothy and throws her in a tower to age. Because, you know, she's too young to have the head now, apparently. And in the tower, one day, Dorothy sees Ozma and everybody crossing the desert, you know, just because. Apparently, Glinda had in her back pocket, and didn't tell nobody, this magic unrolling carpet that allows you to cross the deserts outside of Oz, if you could walk on it. So, yeah, pretty awesome. And she waves down at them, and they're like, who are you? And she's like, I'm Dorothy Gale. And they're like, oh my god, what are you doing up there? And she explains the whole Land of Weird thing. And Ozma comes in and negotiates Dorothy's release, and they talk about how to free the royal family of Ev from the Gnome King. And I think this is where Princess Langdoweir is like, please, dear God, do so. I am so tired of doing 15 minutes of bureaucracy a week. And Dorothy gets to meet the Hungry Tiger, who is a new character in this book. And the Hungry Tiger is so cute, except he wants to eat everything, and he's always fantasizing about eating fat babies. Which, if you think about this as a children's book, it rings kind of strangely. Anyway. And then TikTok talks about how King Evaldo sowed his family for a long life and then ended it by drowning at sea. And this is the whole crux of the book, is this weird contract violation on whether or not the Gnome King, like, owes the royal family its freedom because their father essentially killed himself, thus negating what he got. But we'll see, the Gnome King's got a good counter-argument to this. Anyway, they all set off, and there's some fun stuff on the way there, including, you know, the usual, the pirates... Private, not pirate. The private's braver than all the generals. There's an interesting scene where they're passing the big iron giant that's, like, smashing its hammer up and down. And TikTok is like, he's cool! He's built by the same people that built me, but he just does one thing and he doesn't talk. Anyway, that seems like a cool scene that probably should be in a movie. Moving right along. And I told Dad he could chip in whenever he wants, but I'm trying not to get his face on camera because he probably doesn't need all that there. Anyway, they get down... What?
No, I'm just hemming because I had a hem.
Oh, we were hemming.
It was a physical hem, not a... I have something to add, a hem.
Okay. So they get down into the bowels of the earth, and they try to summon the Gnome King, and Ozma tries to do it politely, and then she just, like, gets fed up, and she's like, do you want, like, your ruler to plead to some other ruler to get them to come out? Or do you want, like, your ruler to, like, have her dignity intact? And Dorothy's like, I ain't got no dignity. I'm from Kansas. What? So she agrees to do it. And, you know, it's like, please come out, Gnome King, so we can, like, talk to you. And the Gnome King, like I said, he's a pretty smart guy. He gives this analogy when Ozma brings up, like, the reason they're gonna free all the royal family. And he's like, well, if I gave you a doll and you smashed the doll, would you be able to say I had, like, not given you the doll? And the girls are like, well, no. And he's like, well, it's the same thing with Sue. I gave him the long life. He voided it himself. And therefore, I owe you nothing, in his opinion. Well, Baum is obviously on the side of Ozma and all this. And the Gnome King also tries to defend himself by saying, like, look, I turned the royal family into knickknacks. I mean, I was nice. I could have made them go out and work in the mines next to the gnomes, who are pretty hardy creatures. But instead, I just made them all knickknacks and stuck them up in my cave. You know, an interesting theory in terms of, what do you call them? Oh, kindness. Anyway, The Gnome King strikes a bargain with Ozma et al. And offers to return them for doing this sort of like guessing game where they have to put their hand on top of a figurine that they think is from the royal family and say the word Ev, E-V. And if it's one of the royal family, they will retransform. And if it is not, then they just keep going, and if that person does not find anyone in the royal family and get them untransformed, they become another knick-knack. And then the people, after the first person who does it, get to come in and see if they can find the royal family, plus the people from the Land of Oz. And again, if they find one, they get released. If not, you know, knick-knacks for everyone. So, this goes on for a while. In fact, it goes on until everybody gets enchanted, and Bellina, in the meantime, is hanging out under the Gnome King's throne, hatching an egg, and she does this lovely caw-caw-caw thing when she has her happy first egg of the morning. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said hatched. Laid, no hatching, that would be horrible. And while she's underneath there, you know, working on the egg, she overhears the Gnome King and his steward talking about the fact the Gnome King made the royal family of Ev purple because purple was the royal color, and he thought that was pretty cool. And he made the Oz people green because he thought that was interesting. He made like the mechanical man bronze because he thought that was a cool idea. Anyway, Dorothy... Sorry, not everybody went all the way through. Dorothy is the last human person to go through, and just out of pure luck, she manages to free Prince Irving. She just picks something, and she has no idea about the purple or anything. She just gets lucky. And she manages to leave, and the Gnome King's like, well, shoot, you got lucky with one. I guess I have to let him go, and you. And then Bellina starts, you know, cackling about her eggs. Well, this is when we discover eggs are poisons to the gnomes, and Bellina decides to use that as leverage to allow her to make her own guesses about the royal family and the Oz people. The Gnome King tries to fight this, makes some interesting arguments like, well, how can you put your hand on something? And she's like, I'll put my claw on it. It will be fine. So I was like, fine, you're not going to be able to figure it out anyway, you stupid chicken. And she manages to free everyone in the place because she was paying attention, except the Tin Woodman. She can't find the Tin Woodman. Just no other green stuff in there. Anyway, they decide to leave, and during this melee to leave, after, you know, they give up the Tin Woodman, Dorothy snatches the magic belt off the Gnome King, and the Gnome King goes through, you know, because she manages to have the leverage with the magic belt, checks all the rooms, but he also can't find the thing he turned the Tin Woodman into, because he's all like, it's really funny, and, yeah. So they're like, shoot, alright, well... let's head back to the palace where Princess Landavere is chilling out with her heads. And while handing back to Ev, the prince that Dorothy freed pulls this little tin green pig whistle out of his pocket. And Bellina goes, well, no wonder I couldn't find the Tin Woodman. And the little kid's like, why? And she's like, there he is. And she puts her, you know, claw on him and goes, you know, Ev, and poof. He's back to being the Tin Woodman, has no idea, like, what's happened to him. And the prince, being a prince, immediately starts having a little crybaby fit about the fact his whistle disappeared. Even though everybody's like, we will find you another one. He's just crying. Anyway. I know. That's not the one I wanted. Anyway. And so, King Edvardo XV is then presented, and Ozma and everybody else decide to head back to the Emerald City, because they've already done their stuff, but that is not the exact end of the story. Why would it be? Because Dorothy has to get out of there somehow, right? Okay. On the way of heading back home, there's a little cameo from General Ginger, who is now a milkmaid, to a guy who owns 9 cows. And there is a weird reference in here that the more I read it, the more I'm wondering if it's some sort of weird, like, domestic violence insinuation, because she talks about, like, her husband's resting up because he has a black eye due to the fact he wanted to, like, milk the white cow when she told him to milk the red cow. And at first, as a kid, I always just assumed the cow kicked him, and now as an adult, I'm sitting here going, knowing Ginger, I wonder if that was some sort of violence reference. Yeah, make of that what you will. All right. So Dorothy gets back to the Emerald City, gets to meet all the people from the book we just passed, The Land of Oz, that she didn't hear about. So like the Pumpkinhead, the tiger ends up, oh yeah, the private gets promoted to a general from Miss Ozma. The tiger eats so much he's no longer hungry. Everyone's astounded. And everybody gets a medal. And then one day, after the fanfare dies down, Dorothy sees Uncle Henry mourning in Ozma's magic picture and says, "Oh dear, I need to go home," because he thinks she's dead. Like, she's been gone a while. And for some odd reason, this does not occur to her beforehand. And so they decide to go down to go see Glinda and talk to her about how exactly can we send Dorothy home, because the Gnome King's belt is only going to work in a fairy country. That's kind of what happened when she lost the silver slippers, going back from the first book. So it kind of has to stay with Ozma. TikTok has to stay in the Land of Oz because he's not going to work in the real world. They asked Bellina if she wants to leave or not leave, because Bellina was a chicken from the real world, and Bellina's like, no, the bugs here are the best ever. I do not want to go. Yeah, to heck with Kansas. And so Dorothy and Ozma work out a signal system with the magic picture, where on Saturday mornings, Dorothy gives it like a certain hand signal, and that way Ozma knows to get the magic belt out and wish her back to Oz. And this will become important in the next book, so pay attention to that. And then it ends with Dorothy getting, suddenly poofed back next to Uncle Henry, and her being like, no, I'm not drowned at all. I'm here to love you and heal you. And there's no explanation given. There's no interrogation of what the heck happened to you. No who picked you up from the ocean. Just, we're cool with that. My niece just gets picked up in tornadoes, dropped down, picked up in ocean wreckages, and suddenly shows back up and everything's cool. Right, dog? Right. All right, Dan, want to add anything? Because I made him sit here and listen to the story again.
No, I'm cool.
Okay.
I'm cool. It's my first time through, so I forget stuff.
Yeah, that's why we're trying to do this sooner. Anyway, that was a talking about thing. Got much talking, but Dan and Quinn look very cute, so hopefully you guys enjoy this. And now Quinn will scratch us out.